lacking is this other thing that he's announced right here. And I read it again. If concept of God has any validity, it can only be to make us larger, freer, and more loving. Well, that's not what we saw in the movie. And that's not what he's going to encounter when he meets Elijah Muhammad. And so he's not going to be enlisted in the movement, is he? So there are good things that he perfectly is willing to acknowledge, and then there are other things that he is not prepared to close his eyes to. So this is why this book, I think, ultimately, even though it's a weird book, it's just a gaggle of different emotions set down on paper, in the end is probably a successful book. And if none of you read anything else by James Baldwin, I'm sure you won't forget this one. So therefore, once again, I hope I don't see you in the bookstore selling it back to the bookstore when you're done. Because these are kind of classics, some of these books. And this book here will, even though it's an odd book, it doesn't make any sense, will last longer than most of us will survive. It will be read by people 100 years from now, when his novels will not be read. That's a weird thing. We're going to read D.H. Lawrence. You say, why are we going to read him? Because I think he represents the sexual and environmental revolution to some extent, and which is certainly a religious phenomenon, very powerful in our own time. And the book we're going to read seems like an odd book. It's like a nowhere book, Etruscan places. You say, well, why read a stupid book like that? What's it got to do with us? Well, he's going to say things in that book that are really show him to be almost a kind of shaman himself, someone who has a mystic understanding of the universe, which are actually much more powerful than anything you'll read in his novels. And he's known as a novelist, but his novels, after a while, get boring and have defects. And I think, again, 100 years from now, a book like Etruscan Places will remain, where many of the novels will be, people will probably not even look at. I mean, you read, I don't know his first name, Thomas Fielding's novels, Tom Brown's School Days or something. These are novels from 100, 150 years ago people don't even read anymore. So novels are not necessarily, don't necessarily survive a long time in the course of human events. But Etruscan Places, I venture to say, will be as enduring as this group of essays here. And so, what I tried to say at the beginning of this class is, I don't want to assign you rubbish that you want to sell back to the bookstore. If I did that, then you can criticize me. But I walk into the students' classes, homes when I first came to this state and university, and I often found that parents had no books. Or if they did, it was something like Time, Life, picture books for the coffee table on certain subjects. But other than that, the living rooms were bare. All they had was carpet, tables, and a TV set. But they didn't have literature, books, anything. And I used to go into students' homes, and all I saw was the books that I'd assigned in my class in the bookcases. And that's a sad thing to my mind. That shouldn't be. But in any case, I hope that some of these books will stay in your house. I don't say they're the greatest books. There are better books. If this were a better class, I'm forced to teach these books within the environment of this class. But certainly Walt Whitman, Bhagavad Gita, James Baldwin, D.H. Lawrence, Black Elk, those are all books that you wouldn't want to sell back to anyone. And they will endure certainly 200 years from now. So where your textbook, whatever textbook that you might have in a given class, you can sell that back to the bookstore. Because there'll always be a new textbook written 10 years later by some other clever teacher or professor to take its place. So textbooks don't endure. Okay, so he says on page 47, before he gets into the Elijah Muhammad thing, I think we must believe that it's possible, well, we already did that. I had heard a great deal for a long time. So you used that to springboard into a life moment. And before I finally met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam movement of which he is the leader, I didn't pay much attention to what I had heard because the burden of his message didn't strike me as particularly original.